Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Sunday, March 1st, 2026. And I really don't think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that the world today is just fundamentally different than it was, 48 hours ago.
I mean, you're not exaggerating at all.
Yeah.
We have basically crossed a threshold. a red line that the entire international community has been staring at for 20 years has just been stepped right over.
We really have. And look, if you've been anywhere near a screen, a phone, a TV, whatever, you know the basic headlines. But today, we need to do something a bit different.
Right.
We need to cut through a lot of the noise, the panic, the social media rumors, and frankly, the fog of war.
Because the fog is incredibly thick right now.
It is, because what we are seeing in the Middle East right now, it isn't just a flare-up. It's not a border skirmish. It's not, tensions rising. The Cold War in the region has officially gone hot.
It has. And it is moving incredibly fast.
Yeah.
We have widespread reports of internet blackouts across Iran. There's heavy propaganda coming from literally every direction, Western sources, Eastern sources, regional state media.
Yeah, everybody's spinning it.
Exactly. But amidst all that spin, key facts, undeniable facts are emerging that we really need to grapple with to understand where this is heading.
Exactly. So here is the mission for today's deep dive. We are not here to tell you who is right or who is wrong. That's not what we do.
No.
We are here to look strictly at the mechanics of this escalation. We need to understand the decapitation strike that started all of this, the assassination of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
And we have to look at why the aftermath of that strike isn't looking anything like what the war planners in Washington or Tel Aviv seem to have expected.
Right. And to do that, we're going to break down the three distinct fronts that have essentially opened up overnight.
You've got the military exchange, which we'll see is just unprecedented in scale.
Yeah.
You have the internal political situation in Iran, which is completely defying all the Western predictions of a collapse.
And then you have the big one.
The economic nuclear option, the Strait of Hormuz.
And that's the one that is going to hit everyone listening right in the wallet, probably by the time you finish listening to this deep dive. But let's start at the very beginning. Let's rewind just a little bit to the morning of February 28th.
Okay.
We had this massive joint kinetic engagement. The U.S. sources are calling it Epic Fury. Israel called it Roaring Lion.
Right. And the objective of that operation was clear from the very start. I mean, this wasn't about degrading a few radar installations or hitting some empty missile silos in the desert.
Yeah.
This was a full-on decapitation strike. The primary target was the absolute top leadership of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Specifically, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. And usually in these situations, there's a lot of ambiguity at first, right?
Oh, yeah. Usually it's a waiting game. Is he alive? Is he dead?
Yeah, we saw that with past strikes on military commanders where rumors would just swirl for days on Telegram and Twitter. But the sources we're analyzing today, the geopolitical analysts, regional reports, even the state media inside the region, they're pretty much universally confirming it.
They are. The intelligence indicates that a massive volume of ordnance was dropped on a specific residence or compound in Tehran, where he was reportedly conducting meetings.
And we're talking heavy munitions here.
We are talking bunker-busting munitions. These are designed to penetrate deep reinforced concrete before detonating. And, we're talking about an 86-year-old man.
Right.
The reports consistently indicate that he was killed instantly, along with several key family members. I think his son-in-law and daughter-in-law were mentioned, and a lot of his staff.
It's a massive blow. Just purely from a historical standpoint, he has been the face of that nation for decades. He basically is the state.
Effectively, yes.
But there is a detail here in the analyst reports that I think is getting completely lost in the massive headline of his death. But it might actually be the most important factor for what happens next.
You're talking about the collateral damage.
The collateral damage, yes.
And this is the tragic, unavoidable reality of urban warfare and these kinds of massive strikes. When you drop that much explosive tonnage on a city like Tehran, which is incredibly densely packed, the radius of destruction is massive.
It's not a surgical scalpel?
No, not at all. Yeah. And there are consistent reports coming from the ground, and this is, despite the internet blackouts, this information is getting out of a strike on a school.
A school?
A school for young girls. The casualty counts in the sources vary right now, as you'd expect, but they're citing anywhere from 50 to 85 young girls killed in this collateral strike.
Jeez, that's just horrific.
It's absolutely devastating. And when you are trying to analyze the reaction of the Iranian populace right now, you have to factor that specific event in.
Right, you can't just look at it as a political assassination.
Exactly. You have the assassination of their spiritual and political leader, combined with a mass casualty event involving children, it is a recipe for absolute blinding public outrage.
And that brings us perfectly to this regime change theory. Because, okay, let's unpack this a bit. The calculation in Washington and Tel Aviv and analysts note, we've seen this in Western strategy documents for years, was that if you cut off the head, the body dies.
That was the bet.
Right. The idea was you take out the supreme leader and the whole system just collapses on itself. Maybe you even get a Venezuelan-style uprising.
Yeah, the Western logic was essentially that the population is exhausted. The economy is struggling. Sanctions have been biting hard for well over a decade.
People are frustrated.
Very frustrated. So the theory goes, if you remove the dictator, the people are going to rise up and basically thank you. They'll see a window of opportunity to overthrow the theocracy once and for all.
But the sources are saying that calculation fundamentally misunderstands the nature of the Iranian state.
It completely misses the mark. And more importantly, it misunderstands Shia theology.
And this is where it gets really interesting and incredibly dangerous for the planners. Because instead of people, dancing in the streets celebrating the end of the regime, the reports are showing something else entirely.
We're seeing mass mobilization.
Supporting the government. Why is that? Why the opposite reaction?
Because Washington tends to think entirely in terms of politics and economics, right? Votes, approval ratings, inflation indices. But Iran, at its core, operates on theology, specifically the concept of wilayat faqih, or guardianship of the Islamic jurist, mixed with deep Shia traditions.
Okay, we need to break that down, because I think a lot of us hear Sunni and Shia and our eyes just kind of glaze over, but it seems absolutely vital to understanding today's news.
It is vital. You literally cannot understand this war without it. So let me give you the brief crash course based on what the regional experts are highlighting.
Please.
You have to go all the way back to the year 680 AD, to the Battle of Karbala. Imam Hussein, who was the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, was slaughtered by a tyrant named Yazid. Hussein was vastly outnumbered. He was surrounded. His camp was cut off from water, and he and his followers were brutally killed.
Right.
In Shia Islam, that specific moment is basically the center of the universe. It is the ultimate cultural and religious narrative. It's the story of the noble, righteous sacrifice against an overwhelming, corrupt oppressor.
Okay, so it's sort of their David versus Goliath, but in this version, David dies.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But by dying, he wins morally and spiritually. That is the key to all of this. Martyrdom is the victory. The blood of the martyr is what seeds the revolution. It's a deeply ingrained culture of resistance where suffering for the righteous cause is the highest possible honor.
Oh, wow. So when the U.S. and Israel, who they already view as these overwhelming, corrupt superpowers, drop a mountain of explosives on an 86-year-old religious scholar in his own home.
They didn't just kill a political dictator.
Yeah.
They unwittingly cast him as the ultimate hero in their own holy story.
They made him a martyr.
They literally reenacted the Battle of Karbala on live television for the entire country. And what the sources are pointing out is that even people inside Iran who hate the government, people who complain about the garbage collection or hate the massive inflation or vigorously protest the hijab laws, they look at this strike and they see a profound religious and national crime.
So it activated this deep psychological defensive mechanism.
Completely. A mechanism that the CIA psychological profiles seem to have entirely missed or underestimated. It created a unity that simply wasn't there 48 hours ago.
It's the ultimate rally around the flag effect.
On steroids, yes. And politically, there was no chaotic vacuum like the West hoped for. The sources indicate that a succession plan was triggered almost immediately.
The state didn't just blink and fall apart.
No, the institutions held. A temporary council has already been formed. The analysts are hearing names like Alireza Arafi being positioned as a potential acting figure. Continuity of government is in full effect.
And there's a really dark paradox here, isn't there? Because the supreme leader, for all the hardliner talk we hear in the Western press, he was actually often the balancing force internally.
That is the supreme irony of this decapitation strike. Khamenei was often the check on the system. He was the one who balanced the civilian parliament against the military apparatus.
Right.
By removing him, the West has likely just cleared the path for the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, and the hyper-hardliners to take absolute, unchecked control of the state.
And these are not guys who want to negotiate a nuclear deal.
Not at all.
Yeah.
These are factions who do not believe in diplomacy with the West under any circumstances. They believe the West is inherently aggressive and needs to be fought kinetically. So the diplomatic off-ramp for this entire crisis might have just been bombed out of existence.
So to summarize the internal front, We have a highly unified, deeply angry populace
Hmm.
and a newly unrestrained hardline leadership that feels it has absolutely nothing left to lose. Which leads us directly into Section 2 of our dive, the military escalation. Because Iran didn't just issue a strongly worded statement and complain to the UN Security Council, they fired back.
They fired back with what multiple military analysts are calling completely unprecedented waves of strikes. This operation, which Iran is reportedly calling True Promise, is not normal.
Yeah, this isn't that symbolic tit-for-tat stuff we've seen over the last few years.
No. In the past, they might hit an empty field near a base or give backdoor warnings beforehand so everyone can safely get to a bunker. This is designed to cause maximum damage.
Let's talk about the targets, because looking at the conflict maps this morning from the various intelligence sources, the entire region is lighting up.
It is. Israel is taking incredibly heavy fire. Tel Aviv, Haifa. There are reports of significant strikes near military installations around Jerusalem and near the nuclear facility at Dimona.
And what's really alarming the military analysts in these reports isn't just the sheer volume of rockets, but the technology that's being used.
The hypersonics.
Yes. We're seeing reports of Fatah-2 hypersonic missiles actually penetrating the air defenses. Now, we hear that buzzword a lot, hypersonic, but why is that such a game changer? Why can't the Iron Dome or Patriot batteries just shoot them down like they do with regular rockets?
It basically comes down to physics and speed.
Yeah.
Think about a traditional ballistic missile. It goes way up into the atmosphere in a very high predictable arc, like a pop fly in a baseball game.
Okay, yeah.
It's moving very fast, but its path is dictated by gravity. So a radar system sees it, calculates exactly where it's going to land, and sends an interceptor missile to meet it at a specific point in the sky.
Math. It's just predictive math.
Exactly. But a hypersonic missile like the Fatah-2, it travels at Mach 5 or even higher. That's over 5 times the speed of sound.
Wow.
But speed isn't even the real kicker. The real nightmare is that it's maneuverable. It does not fly in a predictable arc. It stays lower, it glides, it can change direction mid-flight, it can weave around defense zones.
So the radar literally can't predict where it's going to be a few seconds from now?
Precisely. By the time the defense radar locks on and the computer calculates an intercept solution, the missile has already altered its course. And at those extreme speeds, the friction actually creates a plasma sheath around the missile that absorbs radar waves.
Oh, so it's partially invisible, too.
It's incredibly hard to track. It is an absolute nightmare for any air defense commander.
But the strikes aren't just hitting Israel, and this was the real shocker for me reading through these intelligence summaries. The scope has widened to include the entire U.S. military footprint across the region.
It's a systematic targeting of American assets.
We're talking about direct strikes on bases in Kuwait, Qatar, specifically Al Udeid Air Base, which is just massive, Bahrain, which is where the U.S. Fifth Fleet is headquartered, and the UAE.
Right. And there is a very specific, deliberate strategy here that the analysts are pointing out. It's a concept called magazine depth.
Magazine depth. Now, I assume we aren't talking about reading material in the waiting room, but are you saying we're literally running out of bullets? Because that sounds impossible to a layperson. The U.S. military budget is pushing $1 trillion a year. How on earth do we run out of ammo on day 3 of a conflict?
I know it sounds counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but think of it this way. Imagine you are defending your house against a swarm of angry drones, and you have a state-of-the-art high-tech shotgun. That's your Patriot missile battery.
Okay, I'm tracking.
It's incredibly effective. It almost never misses. But you only have 6 shells in the gun,
Right.
and your enemy just sent 50 cheap drones flying at your front door.
Ah, I see the brutal math there.
And it gets worse. Your high-tech shotgun shells cost about $2 to $4 million each. The drones attacking you cost maybe $20,000.
So we are essentially shooting Ferraris at lawnmowers.
Exactly. It's
About-
economically asymmetrical. And physically, once you fire those 6 shots your magazine depth, you are completely empty. And reloading a Patriot battery in the middle of a hot combat zone isn't like slamming a new clip into a handgun in a movie.
It takes heavy equipment, cranes, time.
Yes. It's a massive logistical vulnerable window.
Hmm.
And while you are spending that time reloading, that is exactly when the hypersonic missiles, the real devastating heavy hitters, come flying in right behind the cheap drones.
That is the trap.
That's the CHAS strategy. Iran is intentionally using waves of older, cheaper munitions to completely exhaust the U.S. and Israeli air defenses, emptying their magazines before launching the precision strikes that actually matter.
Wow. And speaking of precision strikes that matter, there is one specific incident in these reports that stands out as a massive potential game changer.
The USS Abraham Lincoln.
Yes, the U.S. aircraft carrier group in the region. The reports indicate that 4 missiles were fired directly at the carrier. Now, we do not have confirmed damage reports yet. Again, that fog of war is very thick out on the water, but the mere intent to strike a U.S. Nimitz-class aircraft carrier.
That feels entirely different.
It does. Why is that such a huge deal?
Because it signals that absolutely all rules of engagement have been thrown out the window. That is a red line that frankly hasn't been crossed since World War II.
Right.
An aircraft carrier isn't just a boat to the U.S. Navy. It is 4.5 acres of sovereign American territory floating on the ocean. It is the ultimate, untouchable symbol of American power projection. Firing at it is basically Iran saying, we do not fear you anymore. Your biggest stick does not scare us.
Which brings up this paper tiger argument that was heavily featured in the analyst notes. There was this prevailing belief, apparently stemming from what the sources call the 12-day war in the past, that Iran had essentially run out of missiles.
Right, that their stockpiles were depleted. It turns out that was a massive, catastrophic intelligence failure.
How did they get it so wrong?
Western planners looked at those previous smaller conflicts and assumed Iran had fired its best shot. They thought they were seeing the bottom of the barrel. But clearly, the sources now show they had vast untouched reserves hidden deep in these underground bunker complexes they call missile cities.
So they were holding back.
For decades, they have spent 40 years preparing for this exact specific scenario, a full-scale U.S. Israeli attack. And now the gloves are completely off.
Okay, so the military front is chaotic, it's escalating rapidly, and defenses are being stressed to the breaking point. But let's pivot to the third front, Section 3. Because this is the thing that is going to affect the listener's daily life, maybe even by tomorrow morning when they go to work.
The economic nuclear option.
The Strait of Hormuz.
This is literally the nightmare scenario for the global economy. Analysts have talked about this theoretically for decades. Really, since the oil shocks of the 1970s.
Right, and now it's actually happening. So for those who need a quick geography refresher, this is that very narrow strip of water right at the bottom of the Persian Gulf. Why is it considered the mothership of all geopolitical choke points?
Because geography is destiny. It's a very narrow waterway, only about 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, and the shipping lanes within it are even narrower. But roughly 20 to 30% of the entire world's daily oil supply passes through that specific gap.
That's a massive bottleneck.
And it's not just crude oil. It's a huge percentage of the world's liquefied natural gas, or LNG, coming out of Qatar. And Iran has now officially declared the strait closed to all hostile or allied shipping.
Okay, but I've always wondered about the logistics of this. How do you actually close a strait? I mean, it's still an ocean. Do you string a giant chain across it? Do you line up a bunch of warships, bumper to bumper?
Right. No, you don't need a physical wall, and you don't even need to physically mine every single inch of the water, although the analysts assume they are actively laying sea mines as we speak.
So what's the actual mechanism of closure?
You just need to kill the insurance market.
The insurance market. Okay, that sounds incredibly boring on the surface, but explain why that is the actual weapon here.
It really is the invisible hinge that the entire global shipping world turns on. Look, a modern, ultra-large crude carrier, an oil tanker, is a billion-dollar corporate asset. And the oil sitting inside its hull is worth hundreds of millions more.
Right, it's a floating fortune.
Exactly. No commercial captain, and certainly no global shipping conglomerate, is going to sail a billion-dollar vessel into an active kinetic war zone without comprehensive insurance. If that ship hits a mine and sinks, the company is instantly bankrupt.
And the reports are saying that the insurers have already pulled the plug.
Yes. Within hours of the epic Fury strikes launching, the war risk underwriters at Lloyd's of London and other major maritime insurance hubs just cancel the policies for the entire Persian Gulf region.
Just like that.
They sent out a memo. Boom, done. And the moment that email hits the shipping companies, every single captain drops anchor.
Wow.
We are looking at satellite data right now in these reports showing a massive parking lot of megatankers just sitting idle out in the Indian Ocean, refusing to move north. The flow of energy through the strait has effectively hit absolute zero.
Zero. That is, I mean, that's terrifying for the global markets. But I want to push back on this a little bit, on this whole global depression idea, because I know a lot of listeners in America are going to say, wait a minute, the U.S. is the largest oil producer in the world now. We frack. We have domestic energy independence. If the strait closes, can't we just run on our own Texas oil?
I really wish it were that simple. But this is where the analysts say we have to get into the actual chemistry of crude oil.
Chemistry.
It's a critical difference between what the industry calls light sweet crude and heavy sour crude.
Light, sweet, and heavy sour. It sounds like a menu at a bad cocktail bar.
It really does. But it's actually about the complex physics of oil refineries.
Hmm.
The oil that we pump out of the ground in places like the Permian Basin in Texas, that's light sweet crude.
Okay.
It's very thin,
Hmm.
it flows easily, and it has low sulfur content. It is absolutely fantastic for refining into regular gasoline for your car or making plastics. But you cannot efficiently refine it into diesel fuel or heavy jet fuel or industrial heating oil. It simply lacks the molecular weight and the right hydrocarbon chains.
Oh. And the stuff coming out of the Middle East?
That is almost entirely heavy sour crude. It's thick, it's sludgy, it's dirty, and it's high in sulfur. But here's the catastrophic catch for the U.S. economy.
Let's hear it.
The entire American industrial refinery system, all those massive complexes along the Gulf Coast in Texas and Louisiana, they were mostly built 30 or 40 years ago. And they were designed and physically configured specifically to crack and process heavy Middle Eastern crude.
Oh, wait, really? So we are pumping the wrong blood type for our own heart.
That's a great way to put it. Yes. If you suddenly stop the flow of heavy sour crude from the Persian Gulf, our refineries can't just flick a switch and run on the light sweet stuff from Texas to make diesel. The physical infrastructure doesn't work that way.
So even with all our own oil, we'd run out of diesel.
Completely. We'd starve while sitting on an ocean of light oil that we can't use for heavy logistics. And you have to understand the diesel gap.
Explain the diesel gap.
If you break the diesel supply chain, you don't just get expensive gas at the pump, you get systemic collapse. You have food rotting in the fields in Iowa because the John Deere tractors can't run.
Right.
You have the entire trucking industry paralyzed. The Amazon delivery fleets are parked, the trains stop, Western logistics literally grind to a halt within a matter of weeks.
That is a terrifying detail that I have never heard explained that way before.
It's the dirty secret of energy independence. And then on top of that, you have the boomerang effect.
What's the boomerang effect?
Well, even if the U.S. could magically insulate its own refineries, which we just established they can't, our major allies can't. Europe, Japan, South Korea, they don't have a Permian Basin. They're almost totally dependent on imported energy from the Gulf.
So they just shut down.
Their power grids fail. Their factories stop. If their economies collapse into a sudden depression because they have no power, they immediately stop buying American exports.
Right.
Their stock markets crash, which instantly drags Wall Street down with them. It's an unavoidable feedback loop. You simply cannot have a catastrophic depression in Europe and Asia and expect to stay rich in America. We are too interconnected.
So we are essentially looking at a synchronized global economic heart attack. Based on these models, what are the predictions for the price of a barrel of oil?
The conservative estimates from the analysts right now say it jumps to $150 a barrel almost immediately upon the market opening.
Jeez.
And if the closure looks like it's going to last a month or more, you're looking at $200, maybe even $300 a barrel. We are in completely uncharted economic waters here.
Okay, so we have a spiraling military escalation and an impending economic catastrophe. Now let's look at the region itself. Section 4, the regional house of cards.
Right.
We touched on this briefly with the strikes on the U.S. bases, but let's talk about the actual countries hosting those bases. The UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Bahrain, they are caught in an impossible vice right now.
Some analysts are calling it the vassal dilemma. These Gulf nations host massive U.S. bases. They rely heavily on the U.S. security umbrella for their very existence. But the intelligence sources indicate they tried desperately, behind closed doors, to warn Washington against launching this war.
Because they knew they'd be the ones bleeding.
They knew they would be the immediate punching bags for Iranian retaliation. The geography demands it.
And they were absolutely right. The reports are showing direct strikes on Dubai.
Yes. There are specific incidents documented. We're seeing reports of strikes on what is believed to be the CIA station in Dubai.
Wow.
But far more publicly and economically damaging, Dubai International Airport, which is routinely the busiest international transit hub in the entire world, and the nearby Al Maktoum Airport, have both been shut down due to nearby explosions and airspace risks.
Imagine the disruption there. That is a massive global hub. I mean, if Dubai becomes an active war zone, the entire business model of that region just collapses overnight.
It paralyzes global travel, it freezes luxury real estate, it stops trade. But as bad as the physical strikes are, the analysts point out that the bigger danger for these monarchs is internal.
The people, the Arab Street.
The Arab Street. We are already seeing reports of massive spontaneous protests
Where exactly?
in Bahrain, in Jordan. In Pakistan, which is a nuclear-armed neighbor, there are very credible reports of a U.S. consulate being actively sacked by a mob.
Really?
Yes, and you have to remember the timing of this. The sources note that this is all happening during or right adjacent to the holy month of Ramadan.
Oh, man. So religious emotions are already at their absolute peak.
Exactly. Fasting, prayer, huge gatherings at the mosques. The religious fervor is incredibly high. If these local populations look at their own kings and emirs and see them aiding the destruction of a neighboring Muslim nation.
Or even just allowing the U.S. to use their airspace.
Right, just enabling the Western aggressor to bomb Iran during Ramadan, the domestic legitimacy of those monarchies just evaporates in real time.
So they could actually fall. We could see a new wave of revolutions.
Absolutely. A new Arab Spring, but much more violent. The kings and emirs in the Gulf are basically sitting on ejector seats right now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have the Saudi pivot.
Let's talk about Saudi Arabia, because the reports are really conflicting on what Riyadh is doing.
It's very conflicting. Some intel sources are suggesting Saudi Arabia is preparing to formally declare war alongside the U.S., but others, and these seem more credible based on the deep analysis, say the Saudis are utterly terrified and are frantically back-channeling to stay completely out of it.
But Saudi Arabia has a massive, heavily funded military. They buy tens of billions in U.S. weapons. Why would they be terrified?
Because of the fragile glass house they live in. Their entire national wealth, their oil fields, specifically the Aramco processing facilities in the east, are incredibly vulnerable. And not just from Iran directly.
Yemen.
From Yemen. From the Houthis. We haven't even talked much about the Houthis yet. But they are a massive part of this Iranian-backed Ring of Fire strategy.
Right. These are the same guys who have been routinely shutting down Red Sea shipping lanes with cheap drones for years.
Exactly. If Saudi Arabia formally joins this U.S. attack, the analysts believe the Houthis will immediately unleash absolutely everything they have in their arsenals onto the Saudi oil infrastructure.
And they've hit it before.
They have. In 2019, they temporarily knocked out half of Saudi oil production with the drone swarm. If Aramco burns to the ground now, the Saudi economy ceases to exist overnight. So the Saudi leadership is likely paralyzed by fear right now.
It's a complete regional meltdown. But let's zoom out even further. Section 5. Great power politics.
The global board.
Because this isn't just a Middle East war anymore. This really looks like the end of unipolarity, doesn't it? The U.S. is acting kinetically like it's 2003 and it can do whatever it wants, but Russia and China are making very distinct moves in the background.
They are playing a very patient, very cold, long game. Let's look at China first.
All right.
China buys a massive amount of its daily oil from the Middle East. Some sources estimate up to 30% of their total supply comes through that strait.
Right. So logically, you'd think Beijing would be panicking. You'd think they'd be on the red phones screaming at Iran to stand down and open the shipping lanes.
You would think that. Or sending their own navy to escort their tankers.
But they aren't doing that. The reports say they are eerily quiet.
Eerily quiet. Because Beijing's geopolitical calculation is ruthless.
No.
The analysts suggest that China views a temporary disruption, even a very economically painful one in the short term, as preferable to the alternative.
Which is what?
A permanent U.S. military stranglehold on their energy supply.
Okay, break that down for us.
Think about the endgame of this war from China's perspective. If the U.S. wins decisively, overthrows the Iranian government, installs a pro-Western puppet regime in Tehran, and takes absolute control of the Persian Gulf,
Then the U.S. controls the tap.
the U.S. literally has its hand firmly on China's windpipe.
Yeah.
In any future conflict over, say, Taiwan, the U.S. Navy could just turn off China's oil supply at the source.
Oh.
China simply cannot allow that strategic vulnerability. So the theory is they will quietly tolerate the economic chaos right now in order to prevent total U.S. hegemony later.
So they're essentially letting the chaos happen because it actively breaks American power.
It creates a massive, unwinnable quagmire that drains American military and financial resources. And economically, China is already capitalizing on the panic. The reports show they are accelerating the dumping of U.S. treasuries. They are rapidly moving bilateral trade settlements away from the dollar and into the digital yuan, or gold-backed alternative systems.
Right, economic warfare.
It's pure economic warfare. They are actively helping the entire region build financial infrastructure to bypass the U.S. dollar system forever.
And what about Russia? Where do they fit into this morning's reports?
For Russia, this entire situation is an absolute strategic gift.
Because it distracts from Ukraine.
Exactly. This is the ultimate second front. They have been grinding out this proxy war in Ukraine against NATO resources. Now, suddenly, the U.S. is stretched incredibly thin across two massive, high-intensity theaters of war.
The U.S. industrial base can barely handle one.
Right, and there's a very specific detail in the intelligence leaks today. There are strong reports of advanced Russian S-400 missile defense systems operating inside Iran.
Wait, Russian-operated missiles inside Iran?
Systems that were reportedly kept entirely quiet until the epic Fury strikes began.
Are they saying Russian crews are shooting down American planes?
That is the incredibly dangerous rumor right now. At the very least, Russia is heavily providing real-time satellite intelligence, early warning radar data, and technical support to the Iranians.
Because they want to bleed the U.S. dry.
Every single billion-dollar Patriot battery fired in the deserts of the Middle East is one less battery that can be shipped to Kiev. It stretches American logistics and political will to the absolute breaking point.
And there's this broader BRICS factor being discussed in the sources too, right? The Global South isn't viewing this the way CNN or Fox News is framing it.
Not at all. In the West, it's being framed as a necessary strike against terror. But across the Global South, Brazil, South Africa, India, the broader BRICS coalition, they are framing this entirely differently.
How are they seeing it?
They view it as a blatant, unprovoked imperial war of aggression, a superpower assassinating a sovereign state's leader. And that perception is rapidly solidifying the anti-Western alliance.
It basically proves their whole thesis.
Yes. The thesis being the West is dangerous, they are unstable, they do not respect international law, and they will attack you if you defy them. Therefore, we urgently need our own financial system and our own military alliances.
So this single strike is basically accelerating the global move away from the West by, what, 20 years?
Easily. It's a catalyst for a multipolar world.
Which brings us back home to the architects of this war. Section 6, the political endgame in the West. We have the current U.S. administration. We have President Trump.
Right. Who specifically campaigned heavily on the narrative of being the peace president.
Exactly. I'm ending the endless wars. No new wars under my watch. That was the core foreign policy slogan. And yet, here we are in early March 2026, hip deep in what looks like the biggest, most complex regional war since the 2003 invasion of Iraq. Maybe bigger.
It is a massive, historic, political miscalculation. The consensus among the analysts we're reviewing is that the administration fully expected a quick, clean win.
A made-for-TV victory.
Yes. You launch a decapitation strike, you kill the bad guy, you show overwhelming American strength, and everyone cheers. They thought it would be a repeat of the Soleimani strike in 2020, just scaled up.
But instead of a quick, clean win, what does he have on his desk this morning? Gas prices are spiking toward record highs. There are rumors of U.S. casualties unconfirmed, but spreading rapidly, and the midterm elections are looming.
And domestic unrest inside the U.S. must be spiking as well. The American public has absolutely zero appetite for another trillion-dollar Middle Eastern war.
Zero.
And the administration has a fundamental structural problem now. The sources note they briefed Congress expecting a 4-day kinetic operation. Now, Pentagon officials are anonymously admitting to reporters that this could take weeks or months.
We just don't have the stuff for that.
No. We've talked about this extensively in past deep dives regarding the Ukraine conflict. The U.S. industrial base simply does not have the manufacturing capacity or the stockpiles for a long, high-intensity war of attrition.
We literally run out of precision missiles before Iran runs out of targets.
That is the stark military reality.
And there is no off-ramp here. You can't just say, oops, after you assassinate a nation's supreme leader.
Right. You can't call the timeout.
You can't say, my bad, let's just go back to the 2025 borders and pretend this didn't happen.
No, the bridge is completely burned. The U.S. is fully committed now, whether they plan for it or not.
And then take a look at the other major player, Israel's leadership.
Right. Prime Minister Netanyahu.
There's a really shocking detail in the latest movement reports regarding him.
Yes, the tracking data. The reports are strongly suggesting that Prime Minister Netanyahu has actually left Israel.
Fled the country.
He is reportedly on the wing of Zion, the Israeli equivalent of Air Force One, and the flight trackers show the jet heading west toward Europe or possibly the United States.
Wow. I mean, that does not scream confidence to the public. If the wartime leader is leaving the airspace on day 3, what is the average citizen in a bomb shelter in Tel Aviv supposed to think?
It signals a complete, fundamental lack of confidence in the immediate security of the state. Analysts are calling this Israel's existential trap.
How so?
Because for years, factions within the Israeli leadership heavily pushed for this exact war. They wanted the U.S. to step in and decisively handle the Iranian nuclear and military threat once and for all.
Right.
But now that the genie is out of the bottle, the sheer scale of the Iranian retaliation is actively threatening Israel's own core infrastructure, their tech sector, their tourism, their power grid.
They wanted a final solution to the security problem, and instead they got a regional catastrophe.
It's brutal math. That is really what every single one of these analyst reports boils down to.
It is. Let's recap that brutal math before we close out, because it really is staggering to hear it all in one place.
Okay.
A decapitation strike completely failed to collapse the Iranian regime. In fact, it actively strengthened it by unifying the populace around a martyr.
Yep.
The Strait of Hormuz is effectively closed to the world, not by a physical wall, but by an invisible insurance strike.
Right.
The global economy is now staring down the barrel of a massive diesel shortage and a synchronized depression.
True.
And the United States is bogged down in a multi-front war. It simply cannot resource long-term, fighting an enemy that suddenly feels it have absolutely nothing left to lose.
It is an incredibly sobering picture.
It really feels like we are watching history pivot in real time, like we are watching the definitive end of an era.
We are. Several historians and the sources refer to this as a Rome-like decision point.
A Rome-like decision point.
Yes, because wars are notoriously easy to start. You sit in a war room, you look at a map, you pick a high-value target, and you press a button.
It's clinical.
It's clinical. But wars are practically impossible to control once they begin, because once the missiles actually fly, the enemy gets a vote.
Right.
And right now, Iran is voting for total asymmetric escalation.
So here is the final thought I want to leave you with today, and it's a heavy one for you to chew on as you watch the news this week. We have heard politicians talk for 20 years about reshaping the Middle East. But if the global supply chain snaps, and if the gas prices completely break the Western economy, and if, when the fog of war finally clears in a few months, we look at the Middle East and we see a stronger, more radicalized, more heavily militarized Iran that actually survived the ultimate decapitation strike,
Right.
was it worth it? Was the gamble of trying to reshape the Middle East by force really worth the cost of destroying the entire post-Cold War order?
That is exactly the question that historians are going to be debating for the next century. But for us, living through it right now, the answer seems to be unfolding in a very, very dangerous direction.
Stay highly skeptical of the early casualty reports on social media, everyone. Don't just watch the cable news, watch the global oil markets, watch the maritime insurance premiums out of London.
That's the real data.
That is your true indicator of what happens next. Thanks for listening to the Deep Dive today. We will be back as soon as we have more verifiable intelligence to analyze. Stay safe out there.